Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining another installment of ISV Connect Live. Happy to be joined by Frank from Fastpath. But before we dive right in, as people who have watched this episode or these episodes that we do every Monday at 8 o'clock in the past, just a few housekeeping items to get started. First is that we'd love to hear where you're watching from. So if you want to just type in the LinkedIn window a comment to say maybe you're watching from the East Coast where Frank is, or myself on the West Coast, maybe somewhere in the UK or somewhere in Europe, or maybe you're up super late in Asia. We'd love to hear where you're watching from. So if you just want to type in the window, we'll give you a quick shout out. The other is, as we're going through the conversation, if there's a question or something that may be prompted by the fact that Frank and I are having a good conversation, and you're like, I want to ask him this question, feel free to also put that in the window, and I'm happy to address those things towards the tail end. We usually have time for at least one or two questions, so if you want to do that as well. And throughout the dialogue, if you just want to utilize one of the icons, so as Frank and I are having the dialogue, if you want to utilize one of the icons to express like, hey, this is resonating with you, either celebrate or like or support or wherever it may be, that also gives us an indication that the conversation is actually hitting the mark with people. So with that being said, Frank, so thank you so much for making the time on a Monday. It's hard to believe we're already at the end of the start of spring, because spring started about a week ago, but thank you so much for making the time. And so let's get started with the questions I always ask at the beginning, which is, Frank, what do you do? Of course, I know what you do. People to share with the audience, either watching live or maybe the replay. And then, of course, one of my favorite questions that a lot of the viewers like, just to get to know people better, is what's one thing that doesn't exist on your LinkedIn profile that you're open to sharing with this broad audience?
Yeah, sure. No, great. Thanks, Brian. And we appreciate the opportunity. I personally appreciate as well to chat with the audience. It's a great follow. And hopefully everyone gets a lot out of today. So at Fastpath, we're a maker of security audit compliance solutions. We'll get more into that later. The word audit's key when it comes to my background, because I'm an auditor by trade. Worked first, of course, 15 years of my career as an internal auditor at GT Verizon. And in the last 20, you and I were chatting about this earlier, I've worked with business software and starting with Exapta here in the States. Right after the Navision acquisition, my company, ETS Australian Gold, was the first one to sign on the dotted line to purchase this new thing called Exapta that Microsoft had. And I was the CIO, director of IT, that ran that project. So I've been working in the Microsoft space now, business apps, for 20 years. And at Fastpath, I take that knowledge of business applications, the knowledge of security, audit, compliance, and work with our partners out there, implementation partners, audit partners, and figure out the best way that their customers can use our solutions to meet the needs they have around access control management and the like. And security is important for everyone nowadays. It's extremely important for Microsoft, has been for a long time. And I really just matched that background of security audit knowledge with my business application knowledge to have customers be successful. And the audit partners, the Big Fours and the Grant Thorntons, the Protiviti's, BDOs, are using our tools just to help them be more successful using our tools in the marketplace as well.
That's great, Frank. I mean, when you mentioned Exapta, for those of you who aren't super familiar with that term, that was the initial starting point to everything that we now talk about with F&O. And it's kind of dating both of us, because I'm like, oh my gosh, Exapta, that was one of the major, of course, enterprise ERP solutions that we first came out with, that now has evolved to what we now love and use, which is finance and operations. So what's one thing, maybe you just described it, but what's one thing maybe that's not on your LinkedIn profile that you're open to sharing with?
So that's a great question. I love how you do that every one of these interviews. So maybe you don't put your stuff in high school on your LinkedIn profile, but I am so proud of the fact I won the regional science fair 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. Now you say that's good for an IT person, good to have science background. But one of the main motivations was, and I'm dating myself again, was the winner could get a computer. And again, this is back when Sinclairs were first coming out. I was reading about them in magazines and the like. And I got a VIC-20, was the first one I actually won. Programmed a little bit in BASIC and that. But then senior in high school, I won again and got a Commodore 64. And I actually used that all the way through college. And it just continued to feed my knowledge and my interest in programming and security and the whole idea of how do you hack into systems and stuff like that. It goes way, way back. And I did that as an auditor as well. But yeah, that's something that's not on but I truly believe presenting a project talking to adults, how to explain your reasoning and your hypothesis, all that really helped form my professional background. And it still helps me today in the role I'm at Fastpath.
Oh gosh, I love it, Frank. I mean, you're I look younger, but I am actually a little bit older. But when you said Commodore 64, I remember the big, I don't even know the size, but the floppy disks.
Yes.
You put in there. And then one of the games, because I'm a gamer. So one of the first games I ever played on a Commodore 64 was Larry Bird versus
Magic.
Not Magic.
No, Dr. J.
Dr. J. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So right. Using the keyboards, and all of us, for anyone who does gaming, like using the keys to move things back and forth and shoot. That was when you said that, it brought back really good memories. So quick shout out. So thanks, for some reason LinkedIn does this, but thanks again for joining from Cincinnati, Ohio. We have actually a few people from Cincinnati, Ohio. So thanks for making the time to watch this morning. So let's get started, Frank. And you touched on it: audit, security. And sometimes people overlook that, but it's such a critical piece, especially when you think about F&O or finance and operations. You think about the structure of business process and what people are doing, especially if you're a finance person, to your point, like being CIO and making sure that your data is secure. It's no different when you think about from Office, Teams, email, data, but the data is even more critical when you think about business process, because you're dealing with all the financial data or supply chain data or whatever it may be. So talk about, because you touched on it, but talk about, again, what are the outcomes that Fastpath really helps to solve in relationship to the joint customers that we have together?
And we have lots and lots of joint customers together, obviously. So I like to look at security and this concept of true enterprise security as a donut. And we think about this as a Fastpath too. And a donut, again, dating ourselves, but has a hole in the middle. And on the outside of the donut, all these great tools that are available, whether it's Microsoft 365, E5 SKU, that helps provide great stuff. What was the Azure Security Center now? It's the Defender for Cloud Apps and Insider Risk Management, all the great tools there. And the Azure Security, Azure Data Centers, all on the outside. But in the middle, if you want true enterprise security and address the landscape all the way horizontally, you got to take care of your business applications too. And from a Fastpath perspective, we're helping address some of those risks that might happen inside your business applications. And who has access to your data? What are they doing with the access they provision? And where do the risks lie? So if I'm a CISO or a CIO or a CFO, if I'm a publicly traded company in the States, I have to worry about Sarbanes-Oxley or SOX. It's a pretty easy business proposition. I have to have the right controls in place, because I'm going to get audited about that to answer those three questions. But even if I'm not publicly traded, I would argue if you're trying to address security across the enterprise, with Fastpath, the solutions we have allow you to know who has access to your data, what they're doing with it, and things like segregation of duties and access control and provisioning and the like, having the right checks in place before you provision a new user, or looking at elevated privileges, the sysadmin in the F&O space. And unfortunately, a lot of us are probably guilty of granting that to someone during a go live because we got to get orders out the door, or we got to meet a manufacturing deadline. But all that is part of what Fastpath helps to automate. That gives you very quick answers from a risk perspective. Where do we stand in these different areas, to allow executives, to the finance department, the IT department, to feel comfortable they have the right controls in place, one, but two, someone is reviewing those controls, reports and the like. And then third piece from an audit perspective is signing off on that review to show the control was working as intended. So then you can have the confidence that inside the donut, your business application security is commensurate or complementary with all these great tools you have from Microsoft on the outside of the donut.
Gosh, what a great summary, Frank. Because again, I think we all overlook sometimes, no matter what role someone plays, we kind of overlook that being such a critical piece. And you mentioned it spot on. For many of us, when you hear SOX compliance, we all know what that typically means. We're like, are we compliant? And maybe before we get to the next question, what do you find are what do customers typically have before they even come across Fastpath? Is it something as simple as an Excel spreadsheet, or how do people today, like with these challenges that you described, and gosh, what Fastpath can do? What are you seeing customers using before they come across the value that you guys bring?
I would say if they're using spreadsheets, they're a little bit ahead of the game compared to some customers, unfortunately. And again, this isn't necessarily an F&O problem. In any ERP implementation, usually in the project plan, security is a part of that project plan, but it's at the back of the implementation schedule. It's not up front. And Unfortunately, sometimes there's assumptions made, or that we'll be able to do that. Surely the tool allows us to do it in an automated fashion, perhaps, or pretty easy. And then you get into it and realize, oh, we have a lot of users. Oh, we need to create some new roles. Oh, how are we going to make sure those roles don't conflict with each other? Oh, and by the way, IT person, you're going to have responsibility for all this now. We know that wasn't originally part of the plan, but now you have all this additional work you have to do. Mm-hmm. So from a Fastpath perspective, automation is a key to a lot of what we do. And we're a solution built by auditors for auditors. And that provides assurances and confidence to our customers, all the F&O customers we have out there, but also to the audit partners that are using our tools in the field to perform testing around who has access to what, segregation of duties testing and the like. And bottom line is the automation and the ability to quickly take care of tasks like setting up new users, checking for segregation of duties, all these things that maybe have been very, very manual, where you ask IT to run a list of users for me and the access they have. And then someone has to go through that list, compare it to an org chart of different positions people have in a company, say, well, the AP clerk should have this. Well, the AR manager should have this. That's a very, very mundane task. And we automate all that. We have like segregation duties, have a rule set that defines those conflicts you don't want to have so that a user can't create a vendor and make payments to a vendor. Very, very simple. Accounting 101, but it happens. And then the elevated privileges happens as well. So we try to take what are concepts that probably are not new, but put them in automated format, easy to use tool, run it on Microsoft Azure. So the security's there behind it. The data is secure, and you can answer basic questions, and you can provision security and have the confidence that you're checking the right boxes to allow your CISO, CIO, or CFO to feel like, okay, we've got the middle of the donut covered business app wise. We know we got the outside of the donut covered. So now we can achieve true enterprise security.
Well said, Frank. And I think when you mentioned the easy to use tools, and I think that's the critical thing when you think about great Microsoft partners integrating with the Microsoft stack.
Yeah. Yes.
You cover that really well, which is, hey, you could actually have this all aligned very succinctly with the F&O, for example, the F&O experience.
Right.
But on top of that, if someone, let's say, is already using Azure for other things, what I think I'm hearing is that you also are allowing that customer to run it natively in the experience with their infrastructure that they may already have. So,
so actually, that's a great point, Brian. We actually have a new integration coming out. Blog may come out today, actually, where we have an integration to, if you're running Azure AD, identity governance, to provision users into your systems. Now you can use Fastpath to do that next level down. Granular check is what we're calling it, a risk analysis, if you will, to look for conflicts in the provision of those users through Azure AD identity governance. We're extremely excited about that. Great. We also have a tool just on the Azure AD side as well that looks at builds upon what's in the Azure Security Center previously to go a little bit deeper. That the term is granular for those customers that say we need to go a little bit deeper on what we're checking and reviewing from a risk perspective, where they can look at Azure AD assignments and supervisors and segregation of duty conflicts there as well. And bottom line, like you said, it's all in Azure. So a customer can have confidence. So they're running F&O on Azure. They're using a tool from Fastpath now, a solution that's on Azure. There's not concerns about where their data is at.
That's right.
It's probably in the same data center, but certainly it's got the same controls from a Microsoft perspective around their data that would exist using the Fastpath solutions, because it's running on an Azure data center somewhere around the world.
That's great. I think you also mentioned that new solution that may be announced today or sometime soon.
This week, probably, for sure.
Yeah, the AD infrastructure I think is super important, because you think about it, it's not just the upfront, because of course you hope that employees stay for a long, long, long time. But of course things happen and an employee leaves. And so how do you create that governance so that if they're in the experience, not only are they decommissioned from email and other places, but I assume that through this Azure AD integration, that person would also get deprovisioned from, of course.
That's that key, that entire true enterprise security. We can look at the infrastructure bucket of the old LAN, we used to call it, right? Before we had the cloud. And then we look at users, individual systems running on the old days on our servers. The need hasn't changed. Now it's in the cloud, but let's have one set of tools that allows us to address every type of user we have that has access to resources, regardless of where they are. The business application, the infrastructure, doesn't matter. Let's address them the same way. Auditors love to see the same tool and methodology being used. CISOs, CIOs, IT administrators would love to have one tool that allows them to set up someone into the infrastructure. And oh, by the way, I'm using the same tool to provision them now into the business application. Makes it very, very simple, very, very efficient. And again, the automation behind it, I always argue most security people that are hired, they weren't an IT administrator for an F&O environment wasn't hired for that normally. They're probably doing other things. And yet they get this dropped on them and saying, you know what? Now you got to administer security for F&O. And by the way, you got to learn a new security model. Oh, and by the way, you're not giving up any other jobs. Let's make their lives easier. Give them tools that make it easier so that that's not a big hurdle. And they can go back to what they were probably hired for and focus on things that I want to say aren't as more important, because security is important, but things that probably where they can really add a lot more value than having to be tasked with figuring out security, which for any business system is not the easiest thing to do, F&O included. There's just lots of levers and triggers you have to understand, and rely on a tool that can automate a lot of that and that's used by the leading accounting firms in the world, and have the trust that now your job's going to be easier and yet the risk is going to be mitigated.
Yeah. Well said, Frank. So when we think about how the journey, I mean, you mentioned the journey with your Exapta experience and being exposed to the Microsoft ecosystem. So what has that experience been like? I mean, you and your peers at Fastpath have been working super closely with Microsoft for many, many years. What has that experience been like, just for Fastpath and even maybe yourself to just be part of the Microsoft ecosystem?
Yeah. So a couple of things there. One, Fastpath specifically, as an ISV, and we're in the co-sell and all the great things that we do with you folks, working with folks like our PDM, Miguel and Cameron Lynn and Crystal and the rest of the team supporting us as an ISV. Extremely beneficial. The opportunities opens up opportunities like this and other things. That's been helpful to know. We have a second team out there, sort of, again, I'll use the term complementary. That is, we go to market and we try to figure out where best we can identify opportunities to work with Microsoft. There's a team of folks at Microsoft worried about supporting partners like Fastpath. So that's been incredibly helpful, and we value those relationships and the like. But second, as we work with partners in the ecosystem, implementers or VARs, as the Microsoft term still is, or SIs, I think it's evolving to that now, or global SIs, what we're finding is sometimes Fastpath, because we're a software company only, we don't offer services. We have to have a great partner ecosystem to rely on to offer services around our solutions. We're spending some time educating them about security and making sure they understand this idea of Azure's great. Security around Azure is phenomenal. Microsoft 365, E5 SKU, and the tools that come with that, phenomenal. But you still need to think about security down to your client's business application level. And that's where we spend some time educating them. And the successful partners we'll work with, the most successful ones, figure that out and say, let's architect that into the solution we're providing the client up front. And same with the fast track F&O architects we work with on the Microsoft side. On larger enterprise deals, they're figuring out pretty quickly, you know what, we need to make sure we bring Fastpath in, because there's going to be a need for some granular level access control management, risk monitoring, and the like around security on the biz app side. And they're the solution to help elevate that, automate it, and make it easy to use. So it's an education of some of those partners sometimes, because what we don't want to happen, but this does happen sometimes, is the customer comes to Fastpath directly after go live, 6 months in. I like to say they lift up the hood and start really digging into security and find out some of the stuff they're trying to do is challenging, pulling the data out, dropping it in spreadsheets, going through emails, asking people for paper, and trying to reconcile it all together to answer some auditors' questions, or maybe just to answer the CIO's questions that says, I want to know who has access to my data. What are they doing with it? And the CISO says, I want to know where the risks are, data-wise, and organization, transaction-wise, and other. And people scramble to do that. It's great they find Fastpath, don't get me wrong, but I'd rather they find Fastpath up front, because it's built into the system. And then it's a win-win for everybody, because those people scrambling, that's not what they signed up for either, probably. They want to get back to their regular job of transacting business, and same with the IT person. So from a partner ecosystem, it's great working with the team at Microsoft, obviously, Fastpath. For me personally, it's great to see the evolution of all these supporting teams and the like. I've spent a lot of time working with the R&D team over the years, going way, way back to Hal Howard and Sri and Dan Brown and all those folks. But now at Fastpath, seeing the ISV support side that you guys provide is great, but also for all the different partners out there, and worked with a lot of them over years inside the user group as a founder, or now at Fastpath, there's still some education to be done. And I think, but because we're all in Azure, it's an easier way to sell that story. It's just a matter of where you center the story closer up front as your architect versus find out later when the customer stumbles across on their own, which is probably not the best for any of us.
Yeah, well said, Frank. And I think you touched on a couple of things I wanted to highlight. One is the partner-to-partner relationships, because you're spot on. You don't necessarily do implementations yourself,
Right.
but you're offering an amazing capability for compliance, security, and those controls, so that it's better to do that up front than realize, oh my gosh, I wish I could do it sooner, because now you're scrambling because something happened.
Yes.
And you're backtracking to figure out, okay, what should I have done that maybe could have been complementary at the very beginning of a implementation or the thought process. And then the second one you mentioned, which is just the Microsoft engagement, not just with the partner resources that are connected with you, fast track resources that help with implementations. But I do want to call out, because we typically do have Microsoft employees who do watch these. If you're a Microsoft customer success manager, and you are managing an F&O implementation, this is a great scenario. If you haven't brought this up and had a conversation with your end customer, or maybe you're an end customer or buyer that's using Dynamics F&O, hopefully many of the scenarios that Frank described offers up for you to pause and go, oh, I don't have the right type of compliance or security controls in place. So
and you know, one of the CSM piece, I'm glad you brought that up, because I forgot to mention one other thing. In addition to all the traditional security and compliance work we do, one of our solutions has a series of licensing reports for F&O that will tell you exactly what has been provisioned by the customer on their side. And we have lots of CSMs coming to us. We actually some folks on Microsoft support side coming to us that are interested in that type of data to help from an annual renewal perspective with those customers, especially the larger customers, helping them figure out exactly what do they need to buy this next cycle on their enhancements, if you will. And CSMs, especially out there, and we've worked with a couple, but there's more. I'm sure we could help out. It's a pretty easy business solution to help you out there. The customer doesn't even have to own Fastpath. We'd love for them to, but for the CSMs, we have a new model coming out where they actually can just run it for 60 days to help with that enhancement exercise or renewal exercise. So lots of opportunities there to help Microsoft folks take care of their customers out there in the F&O space.
I love it, Frank. And so just a reminder, team, we have about 7 minutes left, and we're joined by Frank from Fastpath, and we've been having such a great dialogue. If you do have a question, we'll probably have time for one question. If you just want to type that into the LinkedIn window, and I'll be able to ask that of Frank. But one of the questions I always like to close, well, before we get to the closing question, but one of the questions before that I always like to ask is, what are some of the customer outcomes that you've seen? And of course, you talk about all these great scenarios that Fastpath does, but from your specific experience, Frank, what are some of the amazing outcomes that you've just witnessed? And you don't have to say the customer name, of course, but like, what are some of the scenarios that you've come across that said, wow, once I came across Fastpath, here are all the things that I was able to go do. You mentioned them, but like maybe put in the context of customers.
Two really good ones. One's Pattern Energy down in Texas, a renewable energy company, was running Fastpath in an AX 2012 environment on-prem, and they were moving F&O from part of a digital transformation project. And there was lots of good reasons of value that I was going to provide them. They had Sarbanes-Oxley concerns, SOX concerns. But when it came to security, that was not a big concern about moving from 2012 to F&O, because they knew Fastpath had a version for F&O. And the transition then to allow them to build users and new roles if they needed to in F&O, because they're already running Fastpath and they already had the reports that can answer those three questions. It was not something that really was a great concern as they planned their upgrade project. And then when they implemented, they felt very confident the security went really, really well, because they were a Fastpath customer. They had lots of other things to worry about in their upgrade from a digital transformation perspective, changing their business. But Fastpath just went hand in hand with everything they were doing. And they could say, wow, that was certainly a lot of value and not a big concern. We can use the solutions of Fastpath and F&O now, just like we had previously in our upgrade plan, at least from a security perspective, was extremely successful. So that's a positive. But then second, you talked about planning up front. And this is another great story, Costa Coffee out of Europe. I spent a lot of time working with the Big Four and Grant Thornton and Protivia and the like over in Europe that are using our tools. Very common in Europe to have a customer implementing, have your implementation partner, and then a third party, usually a PwC, a Deloitte, a Big Four, if you will, Grant Thornton, come in and provide the internal controls advice as a part of the implementation. And in the case of Costa Coffee, They were going to F&O and CE/sales. And they brought one of the audit partners in we work with, and they said, how can we use Fastpath to build the right roles, to design security correctly, and identify segregation duty conflicts up front in that architecting part of the project, so that when we go live, we've already done the heavy lifting and we don't have concerns what may happen audit-wise, because they have to worry about, they have some stuff here in the States, some Sarbanes-Oxley and the like, and they have the group they're owned by, I can't mention their name, but their internal auditors coming in from the States. And so it's a matter of adding value up front, immediate success to address those needs. And again, this is a third-party audit firm coming in saying, you can run Fastpath, we'll help you implement it. You're on board, Costa, why this needs to be done. And then they do it together. And then when they go live, it's like, we update a lot of business processes as part of our digital transformation. That includes what we're doing around security and setting up new users. And here's new reports to be reviewed as part of your business process. And now you feel really comfortable from a security audit and compliance perspective.
I love it, Frank. And those two examples were really good, just giving the compare and contrast. Yeah. And I think the other component was your cross industry. I mean, yes. I think that's the biggest thing too, is that no matter if you're manufacturing, oil and gas, or retail, because I think that that coffee one is probably a retail type of customer. Correct. Yeah. So I think that's the best thing, is that regardless of the industry you're in, everyone needs to have compliance. Everyone needs to have security. Yeah. And you're offering such a great value, either up front or at the end, or somewhere in between. And for those scenarios, and I like how you touched upon it, if you're an on-prem customer today, leveraging this to help with that.
Our solution's in Azure, but they're on-prem with the Microsoft Azure Hybrid Connector. We can run with their on-prem. Well, I guess AX 2012 is going out of support here in a second. But we can run on-prem as well. Absolutely.
That's great. So let's close this out. And I was just looking at the thing. There aren't any questions, but I did want to shout out. So we have another person. Maybe John, Kim, because they're both in Cincinnati somewhere. If not, maybe there's an opportunity for you guys to, as things are opening up, have coffee together, since you're both from Cincinnati, Ohio. So as we close out, Frank, what would you recommend as next steps for people listening, whether it be maybe a Microsoft employee, a partner, or even hopefully a customer buyer listening to this going, oh my gosh, I came across this and this is super interesting. What would you recommend for people to kind of learn more?
So obviously you can learn more at our website, and there's a video play here Dan with some information on that. And you got to go to AKA link. But if you're a partner, part of my role at Fastpath is helping with our partner alliances team. They can reach out to me directly. Frank.Vukovits, that's a long last name, and at gofastpath.com. Easy to find on LinkedIn. And if you're watching this today, you've already been on LinkedIn. That's right. Probably easier just to connect with me on LinkedIn than try to remember how to spell Vukovits. But that's number one. If you're on the Microsoft side, my partner Kim Bro handles things on Microsoft co-sell side of things. I work with Microsoft more on the technical side. I can reach out to her as well directly, and we can talk to you about opportunities to work together there. Microsoft folks, CSMs and the like. And then finally, from a customer perspective, gofastpath.com. You can go out to our website, read a lot of case studies, white papers. We do a lot to educate folks about auditing and compliance, separate from Fastpath. Just a ton of good resources out there, especially in the F&O space. The gentleman that leads our F&O development, Microsoft MVP, Alex Meyer, has his own blog just about security in F&O. And he even has a couple of books out about it. You can go to our website at gofastpath.com. If you're interested in what we have to offer, sales or info at gofastpath.com, just drop us a quick note and we'll start the dialogue. But I would tell all customers out there, public or private, I talk about this all the time at conferences, controls matter. We've talked about Sarbanes-Oxley and the like, and even you talk about GDPR, now I get CCPA and Colorado's Privacy Act, and Virginia's coming out. Your CISO, your CIO, your board, your company's president are making assumptions that you probably have security covered. The question needs to be asked is that true enterprise level security across the board with no holes in the donut? And Fastpath can provide the opportunity, matched up with all the great solutions from Microsoft, to give confidence to those folks that indeed you can answer the question. We know who has access to our data, what we're doing with it. And for those executives, we know where the risks are and we've taken appropriate action.
Well said. I mean, gosh, I couldn't have kind of recapped all that great value, Frank. And I would say maybe the good analogy is with a donut hole that can plug that hole in the donut.
There you go. There you go.
Enjoying success with us. Well, gosh, Frank, it's been a pleasure. thank you so much for making the time, explaining, and I learned a lot too because I knew about what you guys provided. But gosh, the in-depth scenarios of the use cases and why it's important. Hopefully, everyone who comes across this, either watching it live or maybe a replay a few days later, definitely take advantage of. Frank is on LinkedIn. Of course, we're doing this on LinkedIn Live, so use that as an opportunity to connect with either one of us if you have questions. Kim, who Frank mentioned, actually had made a comment in the LinkedIn window, so feel free to also connect with her in the stream. And gosh, thanks again for making the time on a Monday. Again, for a reminder, we do these things every Monday, absent of like a vacation or holiday. So in April, I am taking some time off. So you may not see, we don't have an event necessarily next Monday, but again, stay tuned for the next one. And then also, if you want to stay on as we end this and wrap this up, I do have a video to play that gives really good, again, reinforcement to some of the great points that Frank had shared earlier today. So Frank, before we wrap up, any final comments before we switch over to the video?
No, I just want to thank you, Brian, on behalf of Fastpath, the opportunity. Thanks to Miguel and Cameron and everyone else at Microsoft we work with for this opportunity. And for customers out there, let us be your solution to the donut hole there. Don't eat the security donut. Got to plug that hole in the middle. True enterprise security with Fastpath and Microsoft.
I love it, Frank. Again, thank you again, and enjoy this video. Take care, everybody.
Struggling with security in D365 F&O? Fastpath can help. Setting up security in D365 is hard. Fastpath Security Designer makes it easy with our Security Task Recorder. You can build roles and duties straight from a task recording. How do I know that users have the right access? Fastpath Access Certifications and Segregation of Duties makes it easy to understand who has access to what. How can I tell what my users did with their access? Fastpath Audit Trail makes it easy to see what user changed data and when it was changed. Now that license costs are based on user access, I'm totally lost. No problem. Fastpath Security License Audit makes it easy to see which user, role, and duty is driving your license fees. In fact, one Fastpath customer has saved over $50,000 in D365 F&O licenses.